Hello and welcome to our... I did it again, didn't I? Hello and welcome to our evening Dhamma. Tonight we're doing question and answer. We have good questions tonight. 12 questions, and I mean, we get good questions every week, but some of these are quite interesting. I didn't delete a single question, so that's a good sign. There's one question that I'm not quite clear on, but we'll get to it. So without further ado, here are our 12 questions. Maybe I'll wait a second. Maybe I can say something first. Vesak is coming up, Visakha Puja, the Buddha's birthday, which is really a universally celebrated Buddhist holiday. It's in May, the full moon of May. And Canada has one of the, I don't know, it seems Ontario we have a big celebration. And so I just sent an email and got an application form, so we'll be having a meditation booth there. There's all these cultural displays. Every temple has a display of culture, which really takes up most of the afternoon. You might think it odd if you're not a cultural Buddhist. Why in a celebration of the Buddha's birthday are they dancing and singing and doing kung fu? And I think there's an argument to be made for the devotional acts. Sri Lanka has interesting devotional acts. Every morning in the monastery where I was staying in Colombo, and throughout the country, they make noise in front of the Buddha, and it's really a cacophony of sound. It's not pleasing to the ear at all. So it removes that aspect of it. I think it's a really interesting tradition. One guy's beating drums, and the other one is playing some kind of a flute, and they're just making noise as far as I can tell. Maybe I just have the wrong ear for it, but there's a sense that they've solved the problem of things like dancing and singing because you're doing it as a tribute for the Buddha. But didn't the Buddha teach that dancing and singing are craziness? Didn't he teach that dancing was craziness and singing is just like wailing? He did, in fact. There's a sutta where he says that. So when you make noise, it's a way of token offering. It might seem silly if you're just into Buddhism for the meditation, but to understand that many people are not into meditation, and yet they want to better themselves. They're trying to better themselves. And there are many ways of bettering yourself. A lot of the questions tonight are about ways to better yourself. There's some interesting ones. So let's go ahead and start then. If the buttons actually work. There we go. So here's a classic question. This one is a common question and problem. As soon as I acknowledge thinking, the thought flees, as if I'm repressing it. It seems I'm unable to see the thought all the way through. Is this a problem? So you want to observe without using the keyword. So, for example, with sound, you're able to acknowledge hearing, and sound persists. So an argument could be made that the sound isn't actually persisting, but there's repeated sounds, right? Sound is still moments of experience, and you're not always hearing the sound, but it's very quick and hard to see that. In fact, that's really the benefit of what you're describing is the benefit of focusing on the mind. The mind is what allows us to see impermanence. There are 4 perversions of perception. Beauty, which we counter or overcome by mindfulness of the body. Happiness, which we overcome or counter by mindfulness of the feelings, aversion of permanence, which we overcome by practicing the mindfulness of the mind, and perversion of self, which we overcome by mindfulness of the Dhammas, the hindrances, and so on. So the mind moves so quickly that it helps you break through this concept of continuity, the idea of a continuous self, or a permanent entity, or anything being permanent. So that you're seeing the mind disappear and disappear is really what we want to see. You want to observe repeatedly that until your mind becomes clearly aware that this is the nature of reality. Its experiences arising and ceasing. There's nothing wrong with it, and we're not trying to see things through or really go deeply into them. Mindfulness is just to remind yourself. When we say mindfulness, a better translation might be reminding. So sati means to be able to remember, or in a sense remind yourself. Or if you remind yourself, then you'll remember. You remember that it's only thinking. And when it disappears like that, well, that's what you're seeing. Oh yeah, that's the nature of thoughts, to arise and cease. It's not repressing. There's no such thing really as a repressing. Repressing is sort of a reaction of dislike. That's the only time you can talk about repressing, but reacting is what occurs. So when you say thinking, you didn't react to it, it disappeared, that's fine, it's gone. It helps overcome the idea of I and so on. Permanence. It helps you see instability. It's uncomfortable and it's disturbing, I think, because you want something more lasting and stable. We want to disrupt, we want to disturb mind so that the mind wakes up, really. If you don't get disturbed, you'll never wake up. We're in a long sleep and we need a bit hard shake to wake us up. I take antipsychotic medication and I'm mostly doing samatha practice with the hope that it will strengthen my mind so I may be able to practice vipassana in a future life. Now, I hope I didn't give the idea that you can't practice vipassana when you're on things like antipsychotics. It's just not really likely that you're going to become enlightened, let's say, while on antipsychotics. It's harder because you're not able to fully experience the results and the nature of your reactions to things because you're repressing it. So it's harmful to your progress, but it doesn't make your practice impotent. If you're able to practice samatha, then you're able to practice vipassana, and you certainly should. Just being patient. If you feel the need, or if you have the need to take antipsychotics, then mindfulness won't hurt you. It will only. It's not that even that. It will only better you. It's just a question of how much. So I wouldn't limit yourself to samatha. Off the top of my head, it doesn't seem right to. Now, individual situations, I don't know. It's certainly possible that I might be wrong for your instance, but it seems to me vipassana, or mindfulness. We don't practice vipassana, we practice mindfulness, which leads to vipassana. So if you want to see clearly, just do some mindfulness. It'll help you see a little bit more clearly about yourself. What do you think if someone meditates most of the time, even when interacting with people? Is that okay? I think it's fine. Some people might not think it's fine, and you might lose some friends who think you've changed, because your behavior certainly will change if you're mindful all the time. Certain people might not want to have anything to do with you because you don't resonate with their defilements, with their attraction, with their their desire for excitement and so on. But certainly, actually being mindful during your interactions with people is a great power, a great benefit, because so much reacting goes on. There's so much potential for reacting during the interaction, out of fear, or out of worry, out of arrogance, ego, and so on. Mindfulness can only purify all of that. What's the best way to cure anxiety, worry, and restlessness? Okay, and then you talk about some of your own situation of tapping your foot. And then something that's actually point out different. You're being in your head and reevaluating how you're seen by others, being self-conscious. It leads to anxiety. But being self-conscious is ego. And this is a clear example of how our ego, our delusion, our belief in self, and our conceit about that self, they feed our suffering, our stress. It feeds our defilements. And so worry and restlessness, anxiety, they are exacerbated by this belief in self and fed by it. If you don't have any concern for how people look at you, this is why I always say we're worthless. And if you think like you're worthless, it really counteracts that. It makes you think, oh, I have no more pressure to be worth anything anymore. I can let go. Because so much of our energy is spent on worrying about what other people think, which is such a ridiculous way of living. I mean, I say that not judgmental, because I know how it is. You worry, and people criticize you, and you get upset. And it's a real trap that we've got ourselves in. It's a great power of mindfulness, the ability to experience anything, even people's judgment of you, without reacting. To just be. So try and see that as something maybe worse or more important, in fact, than curing your anxiety, your need, your concern over your identity. Because anxiety is really something that's not that difficult once you get the right technique. You won't get rid of it, but you certainly can understand the way of changing it and slowly work on it. It takes time to actually change it, but you can pretty quickly gain the method. It's just to be mindful of it, to note anxious, and to break it into pieces. There's the anxiety, there's the tension in the body. You'd say tense. There's the heart beating, so it's a feeling. There's thoughts and worries that lead to anxiety. You can note the thinking. But your concern over what people think of you is something separate, and it's what's feeding it, as you can tell, I think. And so you have to be, I think some reflections do to make you remind yourself, it's not the way to live, and it's a bad way to live. It's a cause for stress and suffering. And then to just be mindful of your worries and your concerns and the thoughts about what people think of you and so on. Not get caught up in them. Okay, here's a question which is borderline, I don't know, I mean it's in response to one of my answers, and I just don't like getting very technical and theoretical, because here's the thing, I'd explained that consciousness is individual and linear from one sentient being to another. So then you have this logic, which is a problem often, because logic, you have to prove it, and then proof is sketchy. So you say that would imply that the total number of sentient beings at any given moment must remain constant. Yes, okay, I think that makes sense, but I didn't actually suggest, I don't think, and it doesn't actually suggest that there couldn't be a spontaneous arising of new consciousness. I don't think that happens. I don't think it's considered to happen that way according to Buddhism. But anyway, I mean, whatever. So, okay, total number of sentient beings are given. I think the idea is that it's infinite, really. There's an infinite number of beings. And then you say, which is a really curious statement, that it is a scientific fact. Anything that starts with it's a scientific fact is already sketchy. Are there any scientific facts? Give me one scientific fact. I don't think there's a single one, right? Science doesn't work in facts. Observations and theories based on, I mean, gravity is still a theory. Doesn't mean it's not, it doesn't mean it's not true. It just means it can't be proven as a fact. It can't be. It's not the nature of science, as far as I understand it. So, okay, what's your scientific fact? But it's even odder than that, because you say the total number of sentient beings is far from constant. How would you know? Okay, I get it. If you're dealing only with, you say sentient beings are all the humans and animals on the planet, then that's far from constant. But that's not what we're saying. Yeah, the sentience goes far beyond the human and the animal realms, and humans are becoming animals, animals are becoming humans, and both are becoming very different beings: angels, gods, hell beings, ghosts, all sorts of categories of beings. Any sort of being. There's many different kinds of sentience. So I challenge that theory. It's not fact anyway, but you can say it's observable. But it's not even observable, because you can't even observe a single sentient being. You can't even observe the sentience of a single being. But I get what you could argue, that it's observable that the number of animal life forms on Earth is variable, right? But that's not what we're limited to. So okay, it's a kind of you could argue that it's scientific observation, and it's hard to doubt that, but it's not related to the idea of sentience. Okay, and then another criticism, which is a valid objection. The idea of an individual consciousness that migrates unchanged from one life form to another seems to be in contradiction with the concepts of impermanence and non-self. So, okay, there's no such thing as an individual consciousness that migrates unchanged from one life form to another, and I hope, or I'm sorry that impression was given, because that wasn't the impression that was intended. There's a stream of consciousness. I mean, if you think about it conceptually, you're thinking of these streams and these lines, right? But that's not reality. Reality is, hey, look at this. This is reality. I am one reality. This is a reality happening. And this reality is linear, right? There's no branching off. Oh, look, I'm going in two directions at once. It doesn't happen like that. It's not possible for it to happen that way. I mean, you could theorize, hey, what if there is two of me going this way and I'm only experiencing one of them? The fact that you're only experiencing one of them means there was only one of them. Anything that you could theorize or conjecture about, by definition, is not real, by Buddhist definition, because Buddhists, our definition of real is the experience. So you're only experiencing a linear consciousness. But it's one consciousness after another. Each consciousness arises and ceases. But it's linear. I'm not becoming lots of people, and I'm not just becoming fewer people. I'm one person, one stream of consciousness. But that's descriptive. What's actually happening is, that's conceptual. What's actually happening is moments of experience, one after the other. And apparently that's happening for all of you as well, but I can't prove it. Besides noting and precepts, is there anything else that helps create conditions for vipassana to arise? So there's lots of things. Maintaining a smile while noting doesn't seem to me at all useful. In fact, it's highly problematic, because it's a artifice. It's a construct. You're purposefully trying to maintain a smile, which is going to cultivate very bizarre habits, I think, and possibly harmful ones, where you pretend that you're happy or so on. But there are many things that support insight meditation. I think people are always looking for this, It's hard. Insight meditation is hard. So what can I do that's going to support it? And there's a lot. Keeping the precepts is a great thing. Being mindful during your daily life is a great thing. But there are others, mindfulness of the Buddha. There are four things that I would say rise above anything else you could do, and that is mindfulness of the Buddha. So chanting in front of the Buddha image once a day is a great institutional example of that. Mindfulness of death, mindfulness of the loathsomeness of the body, and metta. These four 4 types of meditation that sort of support our insight meditation practice, especially when you're not in a meditation center. There are things you need to sort of guard your practice. Those 4 are, I think, useful. Other things, I mean, not working too much, not sleeping too much, not eating too much. There's lots of things that get in the way of your practice. Eating too much, sleeping too much, eating too much, working too much, socializing too much, and talking too much. Those 5. Not guarding your senses, I think, is the 6th. And there may be one more. Did I say working, sleeping, eating? I don't know. Things like that. How much progress can one expect when being guided? Okay, questions that start, how much progress can one expect? I mean, just stop there first, because expectations of progress are sketchy. There's so many variables. But I hope you can realize that there's other variables involved. Your own, what you bring to the table is going to matter much more, or it's going to matter a lot in how quickly you practice. Being guided by a lay teacher who doesn't keep the precepts, still drinks alcohol. That is a factor. If that lay person comes to you drunk as a skunk, but recites the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness to you, you could take that information and become enlightened if you're bringing enough to the table, right? If your state of mind is such that you're ready to realize the teachings. On the other hand, a teacher who's not drunk would have a better chance of providing not only good information, but encouragement, and help you feel comfortable. I mean, especially if you're not bringing so much, a good teacher can help to encourage you. And a lay teacher, there's much more likelihood that, let's start with the alcohol. A person drinking alcohol is much more likely to give you the wrong advice, especially if they're drinking alcohol when they're giving the advice. But even if they're not, the fact that they drink alcohol is a sign that their advice they give may be wrong. Not necessarily wrong, it might be completely right. The fact that they're a lay person, I think, had less to do with it, but a lay person, it's a good indication that they might be more engaged in bad things, at least sensuality. Right? They're much more likely to be having sex or romance or entertainment, that sort of thing. But it doesn't mean a layperson often, been many lay people who taught far better than most monks. So don't just think because someone is ordained they're automatically wise. Does clinging arise out of fear or hope from experience? One question, got 2 questions here. Does clinging arise out of fear or hope from experiences? Clinging arises out of many things. I mean, mainly out of ignorance. The main reason why we cling, and it's going to sound very general, but the main reason why we cling is because we don't understand that the things we're clinging to are not what we're clinging to. There's many reasons why we become clingy. Generally we think that the thing that we're clinging to is going to make us happy in some way or another. But it sounds a little bit speculative, that question. I'm not sure what the point of it is. Okay, so when watching phenomena and noting disliking, would it work to note anger? It sure would. Anger is fine. Or just knowing what it is as anger. No, you note angry, or disliking, either one. Doesn't matter which one, but both are good. Depends. I mean, sometimes it doesn't feel like anger to you, it just feels like disliking, so disliking would be better. But it's not a big deal. Here's a robes one. Oh, I guess I probably should have removed that one, because it's a good question, but it's not a question for us. And this is the one that I don't really understand. So you're asking, repression and aversion, are they relative to the amount of delusion that we have? Is there a correlation between the amount of delusion that we have and the amount of repression and aversion? I mean, I think you could make such a correlation, but again, this is speculative. I mean, what's the point of asking this question again? If you have delusion, that's something you have to get rid of. If you have repression and aversion, also something you have to get rid of. I mean, ultimately, ignorance, which falls under delusion, is what we're trying to do away with in insight. But as for them being measurably the same, I don't know. I think that's a bit speculative. And here's a question. Do you have any suggestions on how to do death meditation? Yeah, meditation on death is... so again, I said mindfulness of the Buddha, mindfulness of death, mindfulness of loathsomeness, and metta. So death is one of the four. Aduwang me jiwitang. My life is unstable. Only death is sure. Life is unsure. Death is sure. And jiwitang me aniyatang. My life is impermanent, unpredictable. Only death is predictable. You can predict that you're going to die, or certain, maybe. Life is uncertain, but death is certain. So you remind yourself, you just sit and repeat that to yourself, thinking about death, that life is unstable. Death is a certainty. It's coming at the end of my life. At the end of my life, I will die. There's no question. All the many things that might happen in my life, I know one of them for sure. I'm going to die. I may not get rich, I may not get famous, I may not have kids, I may not this or that, but I know that I will die for sure. For rich or poor, one end is sure. No. The young, the old, the young, the old, the middle in years, the fool and eke the wise. For rich or poor, one end is sure, each man among them dies. It's a Jataka verse, translated into English poetry. I'm at a very high level of understanding. Be careful. So that's good to hear, but it's easy to overestimate yourself. You should never try to estimate your level of understanding. Try to work on what you have left to do. I feel like I am the one person who actually really gets what you're saying. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. I mean, I thought a lot of people were getting something out of what I was saying. It would be unfortunate if you were the only one. But I am glad that you understand something from it. I need practice, and I need to physically align myself with the way. We have opening to come here. You're welcome to come and do a meditation course with us. You can look on our website. There's srimangalo.org. There's an application form. You apply, you come. It's all free. If you get here, we'll teach you. But please don't hold on to the idea that you're some high and mighty enlightened being. Because if you are, don't come and see me. You don't need my help. But if you do, you have to be open to the fact that you still have things that need to be improved. Because we're all about improvement. We're not about gloating over how good you are. Not that I'm suggesting that that's what you're doing, but just be clear. Oh, see, these questions went through. I don't think this is really all that important. Wants to prepare for life as a monk. Again, I'm not really keen on answering those questions here. I know a lot of people want to become monks, but it's a bit off the mark, because these are supposed to be questions about meditation. I don't want to distract by talking about ordination. Ordination, at this point in my life, my relationship with ordination is close students of mine who want to ordain. We talk about it, or who are open to it. Hey, they've done quite a bit of meditation with me. It would be great if they could find a way to ordain. That kind of thing. If I don't know you, it's not really a conversation that I'm interested in. Sorry. So those are the questions for tonight. I hope those were some good answers, or useful answers. Thank you all for tuning in. Wish you all the best.